The betrayal and arrest of Jesus. After celebrating the Last Supper with his disciples, Jesus led them to a quiet place called the Garden of Gethsemane. It was a familiar place, where he often went to pray. But this night was different. Jesus knew what was coming. As he prayed in agony, his disciples struggled to stay awake. His heart was heavy with sorrow, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. Suddenly, the peaceful garden turned into a place of betrayal. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, arrived. But he wasn't alone. With him came a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent by the chief priests and elders. Soldiers lit torches as they stepped into the darkness, hunting for the one they feared, the one who had done nothing but heal, love, and teach. Judas had arranged a signal. He told the soldiers, "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Then he walked up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus looked at Judas and said, "Friend, do what you came for." Matthew 26 verse 50. At once, the soldiers seized Jesus. But Peter, full of zeal, pulled out a sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" John 18 verse 11. He touched the servant's ear and healed it, even as he was being arrested. Then Jesus turned to the crowd and asked, "Am I leading a rebellion, that you come out with swords and clubs? Every day I sat in the temple teaching, and you didn't arrest me then. But this is your hour, when darkness reigns." Luke 22 verses 52 to 53. The disciples, afraid and confused, ran away. The Messiah, the Son of God, was led away by those he came to save. 2. Jesus in Gethsemane. Jesus arrives at Gethsemane with his disciples, but he tells most of them to stay at a distance. Then he takes Peter, James, and John, his closest disciples, a bit further with him. Suddenly, he becomes overwhelmed with sorrow and grief. Jesus tells them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." This moment is very human and emotional. Even though Jesus is the Son of God, he is deeply troubled because he knows the intense physical, emotional, and spiritual suffering ahead. Not just the pain of the cross, but also the weight of taking on the sins of the world. He moves a little further away from them, falls on his face, and begins to pray. "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Here, the cup symbolizes the suffering and death he is about to face. Jesus is not resisting God's plan, but showing that even in his deep sorrow, he desires to follow God's will completely. After praying, Jesus returns to find his disciples sleeping. He says to Peter, "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" He wants them to stay alert and pray, because temptation is near. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. This cycle happens 3 times. Jesus goes off to pray, comes back to find them sleeping, and encourages them to pray and stay awake. His prayer also changes slightly to show more surrender. "If it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." By the 3rd time, Jesus is fully surrendered to God's plan. Then he tells the disciples, "Look, the hour has come, and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." That betrayer is Judas Iscariot, who arrives shortly after to betray him. 3. The trial before Pilate. After Jesus is betrayed by Judas and arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he is taken first to the high priest, Caiaphas, and Annas, for a religious trial. The Jewish leaders want Jesus put to death, but they don't have the authority to execute anyone, only the Roman governor does. So, they take Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. Early in the morning, the Jewish leaders bring Jesus to Pilate's palace. They don't go in themselves because they don't want to become ceremonially unclean before the Passover, ironic, since they are plotting to kill an innocent man. Pilate comes out to ask, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They avoid a straight answer, basically saying, "Trust us. If he wasn't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you." Jesus and Pilate. Pilate goes back inside and questions Jesus directly. "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus replies with a deeper spiritual meaning. "My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is from another place." This confuses Pilate. He's expecting a political rebel, but Jesus talks about truth, spiritual authority, and the unseen kingdom of God. Pilate asks, "So you are a king then?" Jesus replies, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth." Pilate responds with a famous question. What is truth? This question is powerful because truth is standing right in front of him and yet, he doesn't recognize it. Pilate's dilemma. Pilate goes out to the crowd and tells them, "I find no basis for a charge against him." In Roman law, this should mean Jesus is released. But the crowd is stirred up by the religious leaders. They are determined to have Jesus executed. Pilate tries to offer a compromise. It was customary to release one prisoner during the Passover. He asks the crowd, "Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" But the crowd shouts back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Barabbas was a known criminal and rebel, yet the people choose him over Jesus. Pilate's wife and his fear. Matthew 27 tells us that Pilate's wife had a troubling dream and sends a message to her husband. "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." Pilate becomes more afraid. He tries again to reason with the crowd, but they scream louder, "Crucify him." Pilate washes his hands. Realizing the crowd won't be satisfied, Pilate takes a bowl of water and washes his hands in front of them, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." The people respond shockingly, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then, Pilate gives in to the pressure and orders Jesus to be flogged and crucified. He releases Barabbas instead. The mocking and scourging of Jesus. After Pilate handed Jesus over to be crucified, the Roman soldiers took him into the governor's headquarters, a large, echoing place known as the Praetorium. There, a whole company of soldiers gathered around him. Not just a few men. A crowd. Jesus, already bruised, already beaten, and already betrayed, stood silently before them. The soldiers were not satisfied with simply carrying out orders. They wanted to mock him, to break him not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. They stripped him of his clothes, robbing him of dignity, and in mockery, they draped a scarlet robe over his shoulders. Scarlet, the color of royalty, but this was no coronation. Next, one soldier twisted together a crown made of long, sharp thorns and pressed it onto his head. The thorns tore into his skin, sending blood trickling down his face. They handed him a reed, pretending it was a royal scepter. Then, bowing before him, they mocked, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Their laughter filled the hall. Their pride blinded them to the truth. They were in the presence of the true King of heaven and earth. But the mockery didn't end there. They spat on him, the Savior of the world, drenched in spit and shame. They grabbed the reed from his hand and used it to strike him on the head, over and over again, driving the thorns in deeper. And still, he did not resist. He stood, silently bearing the pain, the insults, and the weight of what was to come. After they had had their fill of cruelty, they tore the robe off his back, reopening wounds, and put his own clothes back on him. Then, they led him away to crucify him. The crucifixion at Golgotha. They led him away, Jesus, the Son of God, the spotless Lamb, toward a place called Golgotha, which means, the place of the skull. He was not alone. Beside him walked two criminals, condemned to die with him, one on his right and the other on his left. And though he was sinless, he was counted among the guilty. The soldiers nailed him to a cross. Iron spikes pierced his hands and feet. The wood that held him was rough, splintered, and soaked with the blood of others before him. And now his own blood began to stain it. As the cross was raised upright, pain shot through his limbs. Yet in that moment, he spoke not of wrath, but of mercy. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. At the foot of the cross, the soldiers cast lots for his clothing, fulfilling what the scriptures had long ago foretold. The people stood watching, and the rulers sneered. He saved others, let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. Even one of the criminals crucified beside him hurled insults, challenging him to prove his power. But the other, broken in spirit, rebuked his companion and turned to Jesus. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus, in compassion, replied, Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Luke 23 verse 43. Standing near the cross were Jesus' mother, Mary, and a few faithful ones. To her, Jesus looked with tender eyes and said, Woman, behold your son. And to his disciple, John, Behold your mother. Even in agony, he provided. Then came darkness, not just in the sky, but in the hearts of many. From noon until 3 p.m., the sun refused to shine. It was as if creation itself mourned. Jesus cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? The weight of the world's sin was upon him. Knowing all was now finished, he said, I thirst. A sponge soaked in sour wine was lifted to his lips. And with his final breath, he declared, It is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And he breathed his last. What followed? The earth shook violently. The curtain of the temple tore in two, from top to bottom, signaling that access to God was now open. The centurion, standing at the foot of the cross, saw all that happened and exclaimed, Surely this was a righteous man. Truly, this was the Son of God. The crowd that had come to witness the crucifixion began to leave, beating their chest in sorrow. Jesus' side was pierced with a spear, and out flowed blood and water. And there, in silence and shadow, he hung lifeless on the cross, having finished the mission of love. Signs and wonders at Jesus' death. Matthew 27 verses 45 to 54. As the hours passed on that fateful day, darkness began to fall over the land. It was not a natural darkness, but one that covered the whole earth, an ominous and unnatural darkness that lasted for 3 agonizing hours. From noon until 3 p.m., the sun refused to shine. The land was cloaked in a shadow of grief, as though all of creation itself was mourning the death of its creator. In the midst of this supernatural darkness, Jesus hung upon the cross, his body racked with pain and the weight of the world's sin upon him. With a loud voice, he cried out to his Father, my God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew 27 verse 46. These were the anguished words of a son who, for the first time, felt separated from his Father, a deep, spiritual agony that went beyond the physical suffering of the cross. As Jesus breathed his last breath, something incredible and terrifying occurred. The temple curtain, which separated the Holy of Holies, the innermost, sacred part of the temple, was torn in two, from top to bottom. This was no ordinary tear, but a symbolic action that signified the end of the separation between God and humanity. The veil was torn, opening the way for all people to come into the presence of God without a priest. Through Jesus' sacrifice, the barrier was destroyed, and access to the Father was now freely available to all who would believe. The earth shook violently, a powerful earthquake that reverberated through the ground. It was as though the very earth itself reacted to the death of the one who had made it. The land trembled with grief and awe. But the signs and wonders did not stop there. Tombs were opened, and many of the dead saints, those who had passed away long ago, were raised to life. These holy ones of God were resurrected and walked into the holy city, appearing to many. It was a divine display, a foretaste of the resurrection power that would soon be poured out on Jesus himself. The centurion, a Roman soldier who had been standing guard at the foot of the cross, witnessed the signs and wonders unfold before him. As he saw the earthquake, the darkness, and the resurrection of the dead, he was filled with awe and reverence. He declared with absolute certainty, surely, he was the Son of God. Matthew 27 verse 54. Reflection. These events, the darkness, the tearing of the temple veil, the shaking of the earth, and the resurrection of saints, were divine affirmations of the power and significance of Jesus' death. It was as if the very universe was acknowledging that this was no ordinary death, this was the death of the Son of God who had come to reconcile humanity with God. And in his death, He had conquered sin and death once and for all. The signs and wonders at Jesus' death were a powerful testimony to the truth that, though the world seemed to be falling apart, God's plan for salvation was unfolding perfectly. Jesus' death was the ultimate victory that would forever change the course of history. The burial of Jesus. Open book John 19 verses 38 to 42, Luke 23 verses 50 to 56. As the sun began to set on that tragic day, and the weight of grief settled over the land, Jesus' lifeless body hung upon the cross. The darkness that had filled the sky slowly faded, but the sorrow remained heavy on the hearts of those who loved him. Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man and a secret disciple of Jesus, boldly came forward to claim the body of Jesus. He had been a member of the Jewish council, yet his heart had been moved by the teachings of the one who hung on the cross. He could not bear to see his Lord left to be discarded. He asked Pilate for permission to take the body down from the cross, and Pilate, surprised to hear Jesus had already died, granted the request. Joseph of Arimathea, now standing in the shadow of his master's death, carefully took down the body of Jesus. The weight of the moment was more than just the physical burden of the body, it was the weight of the hope of the world that had seemingly been snuffed out. He wrapped Jesus' body in a clean linen cloth, as was the custom, preparing him for a proper burial. Nicodemus, the Pharisee who had come to Jesus by night and had been changed by their conversations, joined Joseph. He brought with him a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight. Together, these two men, who had once feared the opinions of others, now stood firm in their courage, willing to honor the body of the man who had given his life for them. They placed Jesus' body in a new tomb that had been carved out of the rock. It was a tomb that had never been used before, a place prepared for someone of great honor, a final resting place for the Son of God. The tomb was nearby, just outside the city walls, and a large stone was rolled into place to seal the entrance. The women who had followed Jesus from Galilee, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, stood at a distance, watching with broken hearts. They observed the burial preparations, noting where he had been laid, so that they could return after the Sabbath to anoint his body properly. Reflection. In these final moments, Joseph and Nicodemus took great care in burying Jesus. They treated his body with the respect and dignity it deserved, even as they mourned the loss of the one they had come to love and believe in. I believe this Bible story has transformed your life. Please subscribe to Animate Bible Stories. The Crucifixion at Golgotha. They led